I am currently sitting in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, though I live in the Madison, Wisconsin area, and would love to know where you're joining us from. And in addition to letting us know where you're sitting tonight, we would love to know, what bird did you see first thing this morning? What was your first bird of the day? I will share with you that my first bird of the day was a sandhill crane, actually a pair of sandhill cranes flying in to the field that sits outside of my window. We see Rufus hummingbird at one of the feeders. Nice, Margie, very good. American crow, I actually like the crows. English house sparrow, love it. And then we've got somebody from Mishawaka, Ontario, love it. Every summer I go up to a little town called Wabasheen, Ontario. And it is in the north of Toronto by a couple hours. So as everybody gets settled in, again, welcome to Environment for the Americas Bird Book Club. I'm Alicia King. I am the host this evening. I am joined by Elise. Elise is she works with Wisconsin Society for Ornithology as well as Environment for the Americas. So thanks to Elise for making sure that everything technical goes smoothly, and if it doesn't, it's not her fault. And joining us this evening is Jennifer Bristol, and I'm going to introduce her in a moment. Super excited to talk to you about your book, Jennifer. But for now, thanks again for joining us. Feel free to turn on your cameras if you want to show your smiley faces. Otherwise, keeping yourself muted helps us just to kind of keep the noise down. So I am super excited to be here this evening. I am going to give a quick little PowerPoint on Environment for the Americas and what we've got going on. And then I'll introduce Jennifer. And then we'll get started talking about her book. So I have a whole bunch of questions, and I hope maybe you all do as well. And so I will share with you all that I am sitting in a hotel room right now, and I'm going to hope technology is in my favor. And so bear with me if you see my messy desktop. I am going to share my screen, and hopefully you won't see too much mess. And there we go. All right. And then Elise is going to let me know if anything weird happens while I'm doing this. So again, this is the Environment for the Americas Bird Book Club. Thank you again for joining us this evening. And I just want to share with you the Environment for the Americas and the work that we do globally. We are committed to connecting diverse people to nature and bird conservation. We lead global partnerships focused on bird conservation and really focus on protecting migratory species and their habitats. As you know, birds know no borders. And so being able to protect their habitats and the birds across international borders is incredibly important. And our programs that we do in Environment for the Americas with partners and many others really help to nurture the next generation of conservationists through the education we do, through outreach, and through creating really meaningful opportunities for people to get engaged in the work that we do. We are the home of World Migratory Bird Day. It used to be International Migratory Bird Day, and we have expanded globally. And it is the cornerstone conservation campaign that is central to so many of the other programs that we work on. We annually work on this in World Migratory Bird Day to really initiate highlights of the need for conservation of migratory birds and their habitats, the habitats where they live, as well as the habitats where we live. The reach is global, and we hope that it really gives inspiration to action to conserve birds and their environments through the education, through public engagement, and through joint activities across borders. So we're excited to see it continue to grow. And this year, our theme focuses on community science and its impact on bird conservation. It's really incredibly important that we understand what's happening to bird populations, what's happening in their habitats, what are things that we're doing in the environment that can positively impact birds as well as potentially negatively impact birds. And so all of those bird counting that we do depend on observations from people like you, and your observations matter. And so when we think about the ways that we observe birds and whether we put the information into iNature, into eBird, report it to our local Audubon societies or bird clubs or statewide organizations, all of those observations matter and help us figure out what do we need to be doing to help birds. One of the things I want to make sure that you know about Environment for the Americas is related to our internship programs. So these internships are specifically designed to empower underrepresented early career professionals. So in partnerships with U.S. Forest Service, National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Land Management, many of the bird chapters throughout the United States and other countries really help form the opportunities that these young early career professionals have to get hands-on experience, have members or mentorships, and have a way to be able to get the skill sets that they need to be able to take stewardship actions and to be able to develop a career. So throughout these internship programs, it's incredibly important that we be able to really nurture that kind of potential career. And actually, Jennifer, our author today, we're going to talk a little bit about women in particular and the opportunities that they may or may not have in some of the birding world. So there are many ways that you can support our work. You can be involved by becoming a member. Easy to go to the website and become a member. You can donate to our Happy Kit. Typically $100 buys the supplies that we send to educators in Central and South America, and the conservation education resources that we're able to provide to them are so needed in these communities. You can also donate toward binoculars, whether you provide money to help us buy new binoculars or donate your binoculars. You can also donate air miles to send interns around the country and even internationally. And if you're going on a trip, you could help deliver education supplies. So pack an extra suitcase, put some materials in it, we'll send them to you. And then one of the things that I've done is gone to a thrift store, bought an old suitcase, filled it with stuff, and then I can just leave it there for the community that we're donating the education supplies to. And then last but not least, you can also go shopping. Who doesn't want to go shopping? And you can make a purchase, and a part of the proceeds of the things that you purchase at our online store help support the work that we're doing. So incredibly valuable. So we do the Bird Book Club because we want to engage people in the great things that so many thoughtful authors have been writing about in their books. And so it is the second Thursday of the month, same time, same place as all of them. Although you do want to be careful. Sometimes we switch it up if we are having issues being able to meet with the author. You can register for all of the dates all in one time. And that link should be in, well, you guys all found it because you're here tonight. So I want to remind you of our April Bird Book Club, The Social Lives of Birds. And so sometimes we don't think too much about the birds that are just kind of passing through our yards or through our lives, but they really do form friendships and families and communities of their own, or sometimes they don't. And so Joan Strassman is going to talk a little bit about the evolution of the social lives of birds and when it happens and when it doesn't happen. So super excited to have her in April. And I know April can be a busy time, so we hope that you are going to be able to join us for that. But tonight, I am super excited to have Jennifer Bristol as our author. She is the former director of the Texas Children in Nature program at the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. And she, for 2 years, was the recipient of the Most Valuable Birder Award in the Great Texas Birding Classics. And she guides walks for Travis Audubon Society. I almost went on one of your walks, Jennifer, but something happened and I wasn't able to. Earlier, as we were getting started, I was talking about some of the things that I did in Austin, Texas, like watching bats. I know they're not birds, but they do have wings, and it's a lot of fun to watch them. So if you ever get a chance to go to Texas, you should look up some of the things and some of the opportunities to look at the birds in Texas. And shout out to people if we have folks from Texas joining us. So Jennifer, in addition to the book that we're going to talk about tonight, Cemetery Birding, she has also written Parking Lot Birding and her newest book, Wild Women for Good. And like I said, we're going to talk a little more about that. And Jennifer lives in Austin. And so next time I go, Jennifer, I am so going to look you up. But for now, let's see if I can get out of this and escape without disappearing myself. Okay, I think I'm back. Great. Thanks, Elise, for letting me know. All right. So, Jennifer, welcome to the Environment for the Americas Bird Book Club. So excited to have you here this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm going to share my screen with just some pretty bird photos that I have so that you can watch that and you don't have to just stare at my face the entire time. So let me go with share here. Desktop. Yeah.
We love technology when it works
And
and when it goes
it just sort
smoothly.
of has to, yeah. How's that? Okay, excellent. Well, thanks so much for having me, and thank you so much, Alicia, and for everything that Environment for the Americas does, both for our avian friends, but also more importantly the habitats in which they migrate through and spend their time breeding and nesting and giving us joy. I'll talk, a little bit about cemetery birding, but then I also really want to hear y'all's questions and thoughts. Um, so I should probably rename the book My COVID Project by Jen Bristol. This is a project that I started. I had the idea for it as I was finishing parking lot birding, but I really and truly had intended to write Wild Women for Good as my second book. But once COVID hit, we couldn't do interviews. I couldn't get down to the research libraries. There was a number of things that halted that progression. And so I stepped on the gas with cemetery birding, literally and figuratively. I don't know if y'all remember this or not, but during COVID, gas prices were like $1.25 in Texas at least, and there was no traffic, which is a magical thing in Texas because there's always traffic, and so I would get up early in the morning before dawn, pack up my little van and try to get out to as many cemeteries as I could. And I was really looking for that nexus of habitat and history. I wanted the cemetery to have, I mean, but first and foremost, to have good habitat that would attract the birds, and then also something cool to look at it or an experience or see also while you were there. So, um, COVID was happening during the spring migration, which was also a deep enticement for me to get out and look at these natural spaces, during that time. And then if I liked something, I went back in the fall as well, to make sure that yes, that had, the right amenities that I was looking for. And then it wasn't just a fluke that I was there on that day. What was also kind of cool is I was adding these things into eBird as I was going along and recommending them as hotspots. And then I would notice as other people would be like, oh, okay, this is in my community, and they were getting out as well. And there's several cemeteries that I frequent, and I love seeing additional people getting out there and making observations from there and reporting what they see. Because these are, you know, they're wonderful little ecological snapshots a lot of times. Like this old cemetery you're looking at right now that was in Galveston. That's one of their oldest cemeteries down there. And they let the wildflowers come, and it's just this beautiful blanket of wildflowers that they have every spring. Excuse me, from about March until June. Um, they have live oak trees. They have lots of other trees that support the spring migration, and so it's a great place to enjoy some of the birds that are coming through on the migration there. So um, I really loved to learn about the history of each one of these special places. And as I was digging in, I really realized that these were our first parks in the United States, and especially in Texas. The very first park in Texas, way before State Park, way before any other city park, was Glenwood Cemetery in Houston. Um, and that one played that dual role and was advertised as that dual role for people to come out, bring a picnic, bring the kids, bring the family, and enjoy this space as you're also, visiting your loved ones. So, there's that duality there throughout our history. And sometimes we forget that because sometimes those spaces are now at this point in time can be overly mowed or and sometimes even sprayed with insect pesticides. And so those ones clearly did not make the cut for me. They had to be good habitat. And when and where I could, I try to communicate with the cemetery associations and just encourage them to say, hey, what about having more native plants? Or, do you have a tree management plan here that to replace some of these trees that are getting old and dying? And or working with we have what are called the Texas Master Naturalist. Um, and working with them or working with a garden club or working with some sort of community organization to again help make sure that there's better or and more native plants in those spaces. So um, I really, for me, when I walk through a cemetery, it's easy to get around. They usually have either a paved path or a gravel road of some kind, and that was also something very important to me. My mom is 84, and it's in great shape, but kind of doesn't want to go on a hard trail anymore. And so finding these easier spaces to help people get outdoors and have rich and meaningful experiences, but you don't necessarily have to hike the South Rim Trail at Big Bend National Park. You can have that from whether it's a parking lot or a bird blind or a cemetery. It all is enriching and meaningful um, on how you want to enjoy it. So I'm a big proponent of nearby nature, and that was something that was important too, was really kind of getting people to see these spaces as the conservation matrix, as our, something that's kind of we call it green blindness, where you drive past a space and you don't think of that as a natural space, and yet it is, and supports all kinds of life, even if it's a big cemetery in the heart of a downtown area. Chances are you'll find all kinds of birds and other wildlife that is there as well. So um, I think I'll kind of end there and answer questions. If it's okay with you, I'll leave the pictures going. You're certainly welcome to ask about anything that you see there. I took all the pictures, so I actually remember standing there with each one of these birds and each one of the cemeteries. So sometimes I will tell you sometimes when I look at the pictures of the birds, it's like seeing pictures of friends. You're like, oh, I remember that. Oh, that was so cool seeing that crested car is sitting there, and So anyway, welcome to Jen World.
That's great, Jennifer. And I have to admit, as I'm looking at those, I'm like, oh my gosh. And when the caracara came up, I was like, oh, one of my fave birds. And I always get so excited when I see it. And oftentimes I see it as I'm driving along the road and it's, maybe on a fence or something. But let's start with a question. And folks, feel free, put your question in the chat and let me know if you want to come on and ask the question yourself, or I'm happy to ask it for you. So just as I'm looking at all of these gorgeous pictures, and oh my gosh, look at that. As I'm looking at all your gorgeous pictures, when you work, and for those who are joining us this evening, some may or may not have ever had the pleasure of working with a publisher to publish a book. And I know sometimes publishers kind of have a different thought pattern, or thinking about what they are wanting for your book. How did you decide which pictures to choose? I mean, was that easy? You've got so many, and you've got quite a few in the book. How did you decide which ones? What influenced you the most on putting the pictures in the book?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, sometimes the publisher does have other ideas of what the vision for the book looks like. But I was pretty specific of what I wanted. And because each location throughout the book begins with a tombstone tale, and that's Tale, and then ends with a tombstone tale, which is Tail, which is the birds. But I wanted to highlight something that somebody would see at the cemetery. And so one of the things that, I found fascinating about cemeteries was their symbolism. And so, I picked something that was sort of interest, that they could focus on and, maybe look for while they're there. And then I picked from a bird that I, had either seen there or I knew, was being seen there. And so, that's how I picked for each of the locations. Um, One thing when I worked at Texas Parks and Wildlife, when we did a bunch of research on a study called Nature of Americans, and in that research with literally thousands of people, they talked about like I know I need to get out in nature, but I'm not really sure what to do when I get there, and it's a lot easier for me if somebody gives me something to shoot for. And I was like, okay, so let me focus on a bird that they might see there or a symbol that they might see there. And again, it gives them something specific to do, like right off the bat when they get there, as they're sort of easing into being in this space. So that's how I chose what was going to be at the locations. And thankfully, I took all the photos, so I didn't have to get the rights, from anybody for this book. I will say that we did go round and round on the cover. This was the picture of the mockingbird was the original picture that I had picked. The publisher had other ideas for that. And I'll share this story. They picked a picture that I took, and it's in the book, of some metal fencing. It's beautiful old sort of laced work, metal fencing, but it has a house sparrow on it. And I said, I'm going to be laughed out of the birding community if you put a house sparrow on the front of my book. So please no. Um, and so thankfully, I said, the mockingbird is a state bird. I took this picture at the state cemetery. Like, can we please stick with our state theme here of Texas? And so finally, they came back to that and said, okay. So, yeah, uh,
Love it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's how that went. Now I will say that on Wild Women for Good was quite a different journey because I took very, very few of those photographs. And there's over 200 in the book, and those came from all kinds of different sources. And so, getting the rights to those, getting permissions for those, and then also really deciding, which ones that people had sent me were going to be used in that. Quite a different journey, but yeah, it's a lot easier when you take all the photos and can put.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, for sure. Even then, it's a little bit of a challenge when I was publishing my book or working with publishers in my book. So we've got a couple questions here in here I want to make sure we get to. So Nina asks, have you ever visited any cemeteries outside of Texas?
Oh, sure. Yes. I love cemeteries. I find them to be very peaceful places. I like walking through them. I enjoy the artwork that's there. I think, the headstones are often just so beautiful and striking, and um, so yeah, I often visit cemeteries when I'm out and about, and especially if, a lot of times if I go to a conference and it's outside of the state or something, and I have an hour or two that I just need to kind of, get my head ready to go, or shake off the long day of sitting, and there's a cemetery nearby, I'll go visit that one.
I love it. And so let's see, another question from Nancy is, do you find bird feeders in any cemeteries?
Mm. Oh, that's a really interesting question, and the answer is yes. I um, Sometimes there's hummingbird feeders, sometimes during the spring. Lots of bird feeders, especially in some of the cemeteries that are kind of in a small town where those people are visiting it really frequently. And In my head right now, I'm thinking about one in a place called Ozona, Texas, where, clearly these people come out and visit the gravesite quite frequently, and there's a bird feeder, there's some lawn chairs, there's a little shade spot. And I never ran into the people. I've been there several times, but the bird feeders are always clean and filled, and there's a bird bath that always look clean, and the birds are using it. So yeah, I do come across it pretty frequently. And not as many of the hummingbird feeders, but certainly as the feeders. And then a lot of bird baths, kind of, throughout, again, some of the smaller cemeteries.
Interesting. And I can imagine that some people wouldn't think of like putting a bird feeder in a cemetery. But certainly, I can think of people who have been buried that would love to have a feeder on at their grave site. Okay, we got other questions coming in, so I want to make sure we get to these. So let's see. Wendy is asking, when you travel, do you stop in cemeteries when you are visiting just to check them out? You kind of chatted about that a little bit, but just specifically, do you like target the cemeteries just to check them out?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, especially if there's if I know that there's a really interesting one. My husband's family, for example, lives in Minneapolis, and one day I was like, let's go to the big cemetery that's here. I've never walked through it. I want to see it. What does it look like? So yeah, I'm always checking it out. And um um there's several cemeteries that I would like to go to, specifically, that are kind of up on the East Coast, that are some of the real old historic cemeteries. So yeah, yeah, it's definitely a passion.
Destination, the
Mhm.
cemetery destination. Okay, let's see. We have Carmen who just flipped on the page. Let's see. The goldfinches with the icicles are very cool. And cool, I don't know if that was a pun intended, but fascinating pictures in here. And you've captured some really cool um, animation, sort of, we kind of put those human characteristics on them, but like this mockingbird is just like has an attitude. um
Yeah, that's one thing I really enjoy taking photographs of birds, because I do feel like they, just like the book that's coming up that you're going to talk about for the social lives of birds, they are social, and we do, um, we do reflect our emotions and thoughts on them, And all animals, in my experience, have a way of reflecting that back in some sort of way. I always joke that my horses love to hear me laugh. And when I'm laughing, they respond, and they're all excited too, and I feel like birds, you know, they're watching us just as much as we're watching them. And they, even though they see us as a giant apex predator, they're also curious about us and what we're up to, are we a threat? Are we, going to bring the bird seed out? Are we filling the water? Are we just passing by? So, I love kind of capturing some of those expressions and what they're doing, um, throughout their day. Like this one is brown pelicans heading back at sunset. I love it when they like flare their crown. The males are sort of flaring their crown, or there's something going on with them, and sometimes they sit there and perch, really just nice. But I like kind of capturing them of what they're actually doing throughout the day.
Yeah, so fun, so fun. Okay, we got a couple other things in here, some multiple questions within the questions. So Gwen is saying, I love the idea of people being in cemeteries. Did you meet many people there? Were
Mm.
they families tending graves? And she says further, I have a friend who is in her community's grave tenders. And let me make sure I'm reading this right. I have a friend who is in her community's grave tenders, who sweep and clean. Please ask for me. Oh, so sorry, Gwen is asking me to ask for you.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Um,
So
yeah, yeah. So I run into all kinds of people out there and I love it. Especially in, like I said, in the smaller communities. Yeah, I live in Texas. I will say overwhelmingly the Hispanic communities really show up and are out there tending to their loved ones and spend time there. And it's a place of reflection and thoughtfulness. And then sometimes it's also a place of being social and seeing other families, and caring for and tending those grave sites. A lot of times in rural communities, it's up to the families to take care of their plot. So it just kind of depends on what the guidelines of that cemetery are. Sometimes, they'll mow and they'll keep kind of the general spaces, but then it's like this, for example, Mr. Walker or Mr. Harrison, it's up to the family to come and make sure that things are cleaned off and cleared. There is a practice called scraping, and they just keep everything off of all vegetation, even off of the gravesite itself. And there's several cultures that really do that. Germans in particular here in Texas, some of the Hispanic communities as well. And the idea is that when you keep it scraped, you keep it fresh. And so you're recommitting to when that person passed away and were placed in the ground. So every time you come out, you're remembering them in that moment. And so that's kind of the symbolism behind what some of that scraping means. Otherwise, a lot of times they're just out there doing their civic duty to help out, clean up the cemetery or pull weeds and or keep a family plot clean. But yeah, each cemetery is kind of different on what their rules and their guidelines are.
so we've got a question from Rodrigo that I want to get to, but first, Gwen has another funny question. And sorry, I almost lost it. An oddball question from Gwen. Are pelicans friendly? A 5-year-old asked me this today. So
I think I love pelicans, and they are certainly very well conditioned to living with humans. They're curious, they show up, they'll let you get pretty close to them before they take off. Um, I've never heard of one kind of going after, somebody, but um they're kind of lazy, they kind of lumber along and are you know, fine with us sort of being around them as well. So I think they're great. I think they're friendly, but I'm also not going to walk up and try to pet one.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the tendency. It's like, well, they are wild birds. I will share with you that when I worked at the Suncoast Seabird Sanctuary in the Clearwater, well, Madeira Beach area in Florida, when we fed the pelicans, they sometimes wanted to like get in our laps to get the fish and to be, lack of a better word, cuddled, I guess. Just, they just were very friendly. And I learned to wear long pants when I fed the pelicans because they have little sharp things on their, on their feet. And it's like, ah. Um, okay, so here is a question. Looks like a long one. So here we go. Is it possible or ethical to convince people to go bird watching into cemeteries? Once I went to one of them in here in Peru, and it had a lot of birds, even some birds, I'm not sure what that is, but the most special part was that there were a lot of hummingbirds singing, and the species we have here, the Amazilla hummingbird, doesn't have a lot of audios, but
Mm.
there in the flowers of the cemetery, that was the only bird I heard. So can I convince a group of birders to go there? Or should I
Yeah.
convince?
Yeah. So, in the very beginning of the book, I talk about ethics, and because that is something that was really important to me. This is a different space than a park or a nature center, or someone's private property. And so, you do have to proceed with a very ethical mindset of first and foremost, it is a cemetery, and then second, it is a natural space. And so, there's a whole list of things that I recommend for people to do to practice, good ethics in when they're out there. And then, if especially in another country, just, talking with some of the families and telling them, why you're there. Engaging, like if they're like, no. But if they're like, oh yes, we love the birds too, and this is a great place to see them, which a lot of times happens. Um, I've run into people that at first I wasn't sure, how open they were going to be, and then they were like, they're like, oh, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm watching birds, and they would, immediately open up and, oh, we love seeing the redbirds, or we love seeing the bluebirds, or, they don't know the names of them, but it doesn't matter. They're there, they're in that space. And there's a lot of cultural attachment to different birds, and the emotions that we feel when someone has passed on. A lot of times they identify a bird as someone who represents that person that has passed. And the cardinal is a big one. The mockingbird is another one. Different cultures have different, again, symbolism and attachment to those birds. So I think, if you're in another country, it's just really sort of understanding what their threshold is for having people come to those spaces. I've birded in Mexico in cemeteries and everything was fine, but I haven't necessarily taken a group, into those spaces. So, when you are there, it's just so important to, you know, never put your own reasons for being there first. If you want to get a great picture, still stand on the road. If you want to get a great picture, don't walk on the grave. Don't set your camera down on a headstone. Just some of those basic things that show respect. And if there's an active burial, or even if I notice somebody's really having a very emotional day, I either come back later or I just go to the other side of the cemetery and really give them some space. So again, just being gracious and ethical. while you're there. Thanks for asking that question. That is something that was really important to me. And I put it right up front in the book on that.
Yeah, and Jennifer, just in general, anytime we go bird watching or anytime we go someplace, that respect that you're talking about is important, and not trampling on things that you shouldn't be walking over. And so it seems to be magnified, when you're in a cemetery, and just we should be that way all the time anyway. So that is a great question. Okay, so Wendy is asking, do you have a favorite cemetery for birding?
Oh, sure. There's um, there's a little one outside of town here. It's only about 10 acres. It's in the Blackland Prairie. It is near a creek, and it also has large pecan trees. Pecan trees in Texas are like a grocery store tree. And so I'm always surprised and delighted with what I see there. It's kind of one of my go-to cemeteries. Down in Corpus Christi, there's a wonderful cemetery called Rose Hill. And excuse me, the Texas allergies have attacked today. Um, Rose Hill Cemetery has live oak trees, which again, as especially as the migrants are coming on shore or up the land, those trees are really important, and birders go there all the time. And that was one of the places where I saw what I would consider some of the best ethical behavior in birders. There was a rare bird there, and we were all searching for it. We had just found it, and everybody's trying to get a picture. And somebody comes and says, "Hey, there's going to be, a burial here in about 10 minutes. People are going to start arriving." That's all that person had to say, and everybody disbanded. Everybody was so respectful. Nobody waited around thinking, "Oh no, well now I'm going to get the best picture." No, that was all anybody needed to say, and everybody left, and some went back later. I saw, they went back later and got good pictures and stuff, but thought that was a great example of, just being polite and moving on. But yeah, there's some that I visit frequently, and never get tired of what I find there. That's the thing I love about nature, right? And love about birding is there's always a surprise around the corner.
So we have a couple little stories to share. Let's see, Margie Rick says, I have discovered that the cemetery outside of my little town in Oregon is a great spot to go birding. It sits on a ridge outside of town, so there's both open fields, cows and sheep, and Douglas fir forest, so usually a nice variety of birds. I especially like to be there for first thing in the morning to catch the birds as they wake up and get active. That is a great time to go birding.
Mhm.
And I am always respectful of the graves themselves, never walk on them, and I'm always talking to those buried there.
That's nice to think about. Yeah, that's a great story. I like to think that the departed love to hear the birds. That's kind of sometimes what I think about when I'm there.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah, and it feels soothing. I mean, just hearing that story, reading that story, it just is so soothing to lend your voice to. I'm here, I'm birding. Hope you don't mind. Okay, let's see. Gwen has another comment. She says, Jennifer, I am so enjoying your photographs. Such a great collection. I cannot wait to order your book. And a lot of exclamation marks. And so, Jennifer, as I was reading your book, I get, immediately I was like, oh, what cemeteries are close to me and where can I go? And then of course I was like, oh, I'm going to have to go back to Texas because, because of the things that you've captured in here, the herons, the caracaras, the vermilion flycatchers, the way that the magnolia warbler picture. Oh my gosh.
Mm.
It's just like so stunning. And so it's, if nothing else, if you don't read it, just looking at the pictures is just so invigorating. But I do have a question for you, and it's really related to, in this world of publishing, in this world of writing and the birding world, it's been pretty, I don't know that I really want to use this word necessarily, but dominated by men, and sometimes women. I know when I published my book, they asked a man first if he would write the book and publish the book. And then when he said no, but I've got somebody, and he pointed to me who could do it, and I feel like there was a little bit of resistance. Do you have you encountered that in your birding world and publishing the books? Is that, how did you do you think women kind of get the short end of things, and how do you feel about that? And now we only have 10 more minutes.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, like, how much time do we have still? Um, yeah. Thankfully, I've written a whole other book on the topic that dips its all 10 toes in there. Um, but yes, I mean, especially in the bird world, you know, there I have a nonprofit, and it's called the Victor Emmanuel Nature Scholarship Fund. And it was started for famed naturalist and birder Victor Emmanuel. Um, and I remember, kind of teasing him many, many years ago with, hey, when are you going to get some women bird guides? And he gave me, kind of a what I would consider sort of a canned answer, that he'd probably said, several times. And I said, Victor, someday you're going to have to. And we sort of talked about it. And then a friend of mine started what's called Nature Ninja Tour Bird Tours, and her name is Tiffany Kristen. And she broke the record for a big year several years back in 2021, I think, maybe 2022. And what she realized was, there weren't many bird guides out there that were women, and that women, especially when you're out there guiding together, it's such a different vibe. I'm not kidding. It is such a different vibe when it's all women and a women bird guide than if it's even if it's a mix, or if it's all women with a male bird guide. Um, I've led a bunch of trips with primarily women, and we just laugh our faces off. That's all I can say. We have a really, really good time. And I'm not to say that, we wouldn't do that with men as well, but I think there's just a lot more sort of freedom. There's a lot more freedom to feel like they can get the bird wrong. They can have the wrong answer, and that's okay. I always start off my bird trips with, you know, if you want to point and say, oh, that's completely fine. Like, then we'll all look in that direction and figure it out together. You don't have to, know the bird by its size and shape and color, and what its, you know, call in the spring and the fall are. It's a learning experience out there all the time. So yeah, I think especially in the avian world, if you look at in the past, the ornithologists were primarily men. That was really, held by them. And some of those early women, especially in Texas, Connie Hager, who is quite famous, she made a lot of those early naturalists and ornithologists bristle at the fact that she was identifying birds that, that they thought, well, there's no way this little lady in Rockport, Texas, can be seeing these things. And they'd go on down there, and they'd be all, puffed up, and they'd be ready. I mean, they talk about openly. They were ready to basically shame her and discredit her. And then sure enough, here she comes out of her house with her pearls and a pleated dress, and it's all starched and ready to go. And take him out there to see, whatever rare bird she was seeing and say, "Oh no, this one has been nesting here for 3 years in a row," and uh, um, and by the end of it, they would go, "Okay, you're the real deal. Like you really, are incredible." And they kind of by the end, she had won them all over. But yeah, I mean, she's a great example of people that were or men that were openly ready to say, "What do you know?" And she never challenged them. She would always just say, "Well, just come down and see for yourself. I'll take you out and show you." And of course they're corresponding in letters and on the telephone. But because this was back in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, up until the kind of early 70s. But yeah, I think we've come a long way. And I get excited. I get really excited about where we are now. That there's women authors, writing on this topic. That the publishing world is opening to that as well. I mean, I won't lie. Getting Wild Women for Good through the system took some pushing and some sort of elbow throwing on my end to get that done. What their vision and what my vision was different, and thankfully in the end, my vision came out. Um, but I think that we're in a better place than we were even when I started working in the conservation world, about 20 years ago. So I've seen, I've seen a lot of headway, and I think a lot of that happens in the nonprofit space. That's a place where women can really build careers that are sort of outside what I would consider the normal systems of some of like our state park systems or the national park systems or the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and some of those things. Opening up those careers also to different degree types has had a huge impact of what women how they can enter into those fields and not necessarily always have to have a rigor like a biology degree or wildlife management. Which I've talked to plenty of women who were in those degree programs, and sometimes they were the only women, and maybe that was only 7 or 8 years ago. So it's all happening in real time, and I'm very excited, I think, about where we are and how far we've come, even in my lifetime, and certainly in yours too, Alicia.
Yeah, and it's certainly, I know that just the ornithological societies, when you look at what used to be the AOU and is now the American Ornithological Society, um, you know, a woman president and a woman executive director. And boy, they're doing a bang up job. And their meetings have just really blossomed and are so inclusive and inviting in much of the way that you're talking about, like the ability that or the opportunity for us to learn together, engage together, discover together, and certainly, I think it's less and less that it's like the good old boy club, and like we're the ones who are that that are discovering all this stuff and doing all of this research and pointing out the birds. So yeah, so I think you're right. I think we've come a long way, and certainly I really want to read your book about women, and I sure hope that that folks and Jennifer, as a lot of times people come to the Bird Book Club having not read the book, but once they meet someone like you and see what you are offering in the book, I highly recommend this book. And it was delightful to read, and the pictures are just amazing, and the stories that you tell are incredible. And speaking of that, Carmen speaks my mind. She says, speaking of inclusive, it is evident in every way in your books.
Mm.
Thanks.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you so much.
So it has been delightful speaking with you, Jennifer, and we are going to wind down now. I know people have things to do in the evening, but it has been so delightful having you here. Thank you so much for sharing those pictures. And I don't know about you all that have joined us this evening, but I have to admit, Jennifer, as I was looking at those pictures as they were scrolling through, I love that because it just gave us such a picture and a window into your world as you were thinking about birds and as you were writing this book and putting pen to paper. But they were just, like I said earlier, some of the pictures, I'm like, I could see cartoons coming out of some of the faces of those birds. And then, like, as you're talking about women, I was thinking, boy, some of those birds had some attitude, and that would be real fun to kind of take some of those choice pictures and attitude them.
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Yeah. Well, hopefully too, I mean, hopefully looking at those pictures, has inspired at least one of you to go out this weekend maybe and do a little bird watching and maybe explore the cemetery in your community.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again, Jennifer. So delightful to chat with you. So delightful to read the book. Looking forward to your other books as well. And um, hopefully, everybody will join us in April when we talk about the social lives of birds and look at all of the other great authors that we have scheduled for our Bird Book Club. And in the meanwhile, go to the website, figure out, is there a World Migratory Bird Day event happening near you? Not only can you participate in it, but you could volunteer or do something fun related to World Migratory Bird Day, and maybe even get with a cemetery and suggest that they do a bird trip for World Migratory Bird Day or a bird field trip at a cemetery and get them engaged in World Migratory Bird Day things.
I
So,
love that idea. I love that. I'm taking it.
thank, yeah, let's do it, Jennifer. I'm going to come to Austin.
Do it. Do it.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your evening and take care and happy birding. Good night.